I wanted to find Saria and make sure that she was safe. I remembered that Gabora had told me that the Sacred Forest Meadow was the entrance to the Forest Temple, so fortunately, I knew where to look. Like the others, Mido was able to discern something from me, but he couldn't place why. As I said, Mido would have a much more important role to play in these events. Later. For now, it was time to save Saria. The meadow had changed now that Ganondorf had taken over. He used some of his deadliest servants to guard the entrance to the temple. Moblins, creatures created of his own hand, a manifestation of his anger and hatred given life. As I saw them, I was even more worried about Saria. And finding an empty stump didn't help. I really do wonder if that's true. My memories had proved to be changing all the time. Almost like a piece of my life was missing. The four Poe sisters. The game shows that they took the flames from the four torches, meaning that I'd have to hunt them down to get them back. But what the game didn't show you was the fact that they didn't just go off into the four corners of the temple. They actually stuck around. They actually spoke to me. They seemed elated to see me, recalling fond memories of the last time we met. These four ghosts acted like they knew me from somewhere. And what's even more, memory fragments of them were starting to come to me. Needless to say, I was curious. Cautious, but curious. They were using somewhat vague language, mainly because they assumed that I remembered them as well. They were thanking me for having freed them the last time we met, and they believed that I had come to do the same here. I expressed my confusion at this and told them that I was looking for Saria. They coyly mentioned that there was a girl who came in here, but now she's lost somewhere inside. They knew where she was, but they wouldn't tell me where unless I helped them again. So I decided to hear their plea. Apparently, after I had helped put them to rest the first time, their souls were able to move on. But when Ganondorf used the temples to bring his army to the world, they were caught up in it as well. Drafted, you might say. Being rather pissed off at being disturbed from their rest, they refused him. So as punishment, he kept them imprisoned in the temple until they saw things his way. They wanted me to put them to rest again, much like I had supposedly done before. But they soon realized that I wasn't too well equipped for the job, and told me that I would need to find something in the temple to do it. And that's when they took off. I sensed that they were the ones making a game out of it. I soon found the forest temple to be similar to the spirit temple, a place of worship and safekeeping turned into a den of monsters. The various keys and locked doors around were not an attempt to keep me from going in, but to keep the creatures from getting out. Not that the efforts managed to stifle Ganondorf's influence. From what I had heard in Kakariko, his army was huge, and growing by the day thanks to the temples. And if it were made up of some of these nightmarish creatures, it would prove to be formidable indeed. The confusion is not lost on me that we refer to these things as bubbles. But what confused me even more was that after I had been hit by one, I had the almost instinctive need to play the Song of Storms, as if to respond to an affliction that did not come. I don't know why, but something about the glow of the Master Sword held the answer. I was taken aback at having to confront two Stalfos here. I had gotten lucky with the one I encountered as a child, so I wasn't sure how I'd fare against two. But the most bizarre thing that occurred was that while I was observing their movements, more memories came back to me. I was in another place, at another time, fighting in a battle similar to this one. Amidst the confusion, I found the confidence to stand up to these creatures. It was strange. I wasn't afraid at all. The temples did have maps, in a sense. They were mostly impromptu things, quickly thrown together based off of architectural plans for the structure. When Ganondorf took over, several people went into the temples for shelter. That was a mistake. They soon found themselves surrounded by monsters. The maps marked off the source of where they were all coming from. The architecture of the temples have magic woven into the structures, useful to keep potential thieves or invaders trapped. Barring that, I still have no idea how this corridor was supposed to work. It made for an amusing puzzle once I had figured it out, but the strangest thing was how familiar this corridor was to me. These are wall monsters. While off-putting at first, they're incredibly easy to avoid, and even easier to dispatch. Much like other things, they're not nearly as frightening as everybody makes them out to be. Believe me. I'd have much greater frustrations dealing with gigantic, disembodied hands later on. Spoilers, it's not what you're thinking. Joelle, or Jo for short, the second oldest of the four sisters. Jo was distinct for being a tomboy. Like her siblings, she had a very playful personality, though ironically she gave me the most help. She mentioned the tool I needed was in the next room, and in particular, her actions were meant to be a prelude to what I would face later, especially when it came to how ghosts could interact with portraits. The more dangerous thing with Stalfos is, if you don't finish them off quick enough, they just keep getting back up. Easily one of the most useful items I would ever have, but like most, I didn't get it from a chest. Instead, I recovered the bow and a quiver from its previous owner, after discovering them in an enormous spider web. My guess is that they had been there for a long time. What was even more important was how nervous I was when I recovered it. It was quite a departure from the slingshot I was used to, and yet, wielding it felt somehow familiar, like it wasn't the first time I had used it. More flashes of an impossible past came flooding back to me, showing that I had used one. Before long, I would realize that I had almost instinctual expertise at using a bow. Jo was quite excited that she was the first one that I found. She made quite the amusing game out of it, claiming to not want to make it too easy for me. Strangely enough, when I fought with her, memories of fighting her, as well as one of her sisters, came back to me. I didn't know how to explain it, but at least it helped me form a strategy. I do remember her thanking me once it was over, and she had been put to rest. Beth was the third child of her sister's family. She held herself up as the quiet, reserved, and intellectual of the four, but as you can clearly see here, she was quite playful and devious herself. Because she and Jo were close in age, it made me realize that she was the sister that had fought alongside Jo in my memories from my first time they had mentioned. Still, when I asked about it, they weren't willing to say anything. There weren't many of these jeweled keys at all. While I mentioned that those unfortunate enough to enter the temples tried to lock the monsters inside, their efforts weren't efficient enough for something like this. The bosses, as the games called them, were more or less the commanders or lieutenants in Ganondorf's army. Powerful creatures that Ganondorf either had overseeing his schemes in their respective areas, or the creatures he was using to spread chaos. Amy was the youngest of the sibling quartet. She was also the most nervous, least assertive of them as well. Being the youngest meant that she liked to play, but not nearly as deviously as her older sisters. Instead, she liked playing puzzle games, as you can see here. After I had cleared out most of the temple and freed the previous three sisters, I was getting nervous. I marked off all the rooms that I had been to on the map, except for the one chamber in the basement beneath the central area. And there had been no sign of the final sister, or Saria. Because I had so few options of where to go, I decided to return to the center to see if I could get into the basement. And that's where she was waiting for me. Meg was the eldest of the four sisters. While the game implies something else, she was crying when I first found her. She was happy that her sisters had been put to rest again, but doing so reminded her of how she was in life and the circumstances of how the four of them died, something that is a rare occurrence in Pose. The memories upset her, but she was ready to finish our game. Much like her sisters, I had a memory of fighting her before. so I was well equipped to counter her strategy, almost like a reflex, really. I briefly mentioned this to her during the fight, that I had memories of them, but I didn't know where they came from. She, of course, didn't understand any more than I did. When it was over, she expressed her gratitude on behalf of her sisters, and before disappearing, she told me that Saria was being held captive down below, and that the skills I had developed training with them should have prepared me to face what lay ahead. I managed to find Saria being kept in one of the cells blocked off by this moving puzzle. I was so relieved to see her that it took me a moment to realize that she, like the other Kokiri, hadn't aged a day since I left. It was only via the moderately shocked look in her eye at the sight of me that I finally figured it out for myself. But now that I had found her, the first thing I wanted to do was get her out of there. I had almost completely forgotten about whatever sage I was supposed to help awaken to seal this place off from the evil realm, much less any other reason why I came here. But Saria refused to leave. She said that she could hear the voices of the spirits in this place calling for help. She wanted to help me free them, and she refused to leave until I saw the job through to the end. Reluctantly, I allowed her to tag along, so long as she stuck close to me. I could sense an accumulation of evil coming from the final chamber in the temple. It showed to be a strange art gallery of some kind. I didn't like this at all, much less the fact that I had brought Saria along with me. I could sense that we were being watched by something, but the room was empty. No puzzle to solve or monsters to fight. At my behest, we moved back towards the entrance. Only to discover that we were trapped, and Saria screamed when she saw him. I couldn't believe it myself when I saw him there. After 7 years, Ganondorf and I were face to face again, but to me, it had only been just a few hours ago. I didn't expect that he would face me so soon and was caught off guard, but during my moment's hesitation, I recalled how I had the Master Sword and wasn't a child anymore, and memories of the last time we met came back. I was ready for him. He noticed my hesitation and fear. He smiled. What startled me the most was when he literally tore back the skin of his face and rose up into the air. It became apparent that I was fighting a ghost. The advice I gained from the Poe sisters was useful, but then again, the fact that this phantom could conjure up illusions did overwhelm me a bit. Saria stayed out of the way during the fight, but she was concerned whenever I got hit. I told her to stay back for her own safety. Fortunately, I was able to destroy his horse, and the real battle began. I was at first alarmed when I saw him shooting energy balls similar to the one he had used on me as a kid, but it was apparent that these were not of the same quality. What was even better was, the Master Sword could deflect them. Aiming was the tricky part. I couldn't believe I had actually done it when I defeated him. Then again, the relief at killing whatever this thing is was short-lived when the real Ganondorf made his presence known. This creature was just a copy, a facsimile of his own power that he used to perform his bidding. When the phantom disappeared, the portal into the sacred realm revealed itself, and much to my surprise, it reacted to Saria's presence. I genuinely didn't expect this, but I also didn't like the way Saria talked to me, so plain and bluntly, with that odd look in her eye. She spoke so neutrally that it was like she was pretending that she didn't know me, or didn't care. Part of me wondered how much she had known, that even from 7 years ago, if she was the forest sage or not. The resigned look on her face when she told me that, it made me think that she was absolutely heartbroken. So that's the story. When I realized that none of the other Kokiri had grown up, part of me began to realize the truth. But I guess I had to hear it from a friend. It was nice to see that the Deku Tree would continue to live on in some form, but when I had left the Temple of Light, I didn't appear there first. It was one of the last places I knew I had to visit before leaving, to pay my respects. Instead, the portal dropped me off back outside the temple, and that's where I was confronted by Mido. After that, things were different between me and him. For a short while, at least. With the Deku Tree sprout growing, the monsters that had plagued the village had retreated and were now being kept at bay. But unless Ganondorf could be stopped for good, the sprout would not be powerful enough to hold them off for long. He requested that I find a safe haven for the Kokiri to go to should the worst happen. Seeing them out in the open again made me happy. I didn't have the heart to tell them that the forest still wasn't entirely safe. After all, I had so much on my mind. 7 years had indeed passed, and it was like I had lost my own identity along with them. I had just learned that I was a Hylian, a stranger in the only home I knew. And worse, the burden of what had befallen Hyrule because I had pulled the Master Sword had now truly hit me. People were suffering, and my friends, like Saria, were now going to have to take action to help correct my mistake. But as I looked around the home that I had left all those years ago when I began this adventure, I was filled with resolve and a renewed sense of purpose. Apparently I had this destiny that I couldn't ignore. I am the hero of time, and I was going to set things right, no matter what it cost, or wherever it took me. I was going to awaken the other sages, liberate my friends from tyranny, put an end to Ganondorf's evil once and for all. And most importantly, I was going to find Zelda, because in spite of everything I had seen, something deep down told me that she was still alive, and she was out there, waiting for me.